All right, this next factoring skill can be a little tricky. Sometimes there is no greatest common factor across all of the terms of an expression, but we can find pairs of terms that have a common factor. Okay, so it's a little sneaky. But let's take a look at this first example and you'll see what I mean. Now, you can see we have x cubed plus 4x squared plus 3x plus 12, right? There's no common factor. There's no common factor among all four of those terms, right? But if you look at the first two terms, you can see that there's a common factor of x squared. So we can factor an x squared out of the first two terms, and we would be left with x plus 4. Okay, and then you can see in the second pair of terms there's a common factor of a 3. So I can factor out a 3, and then I'm left with x plus 4. All right, now this doesn't always work, but in this case you can see that we have two terms now, and those two terms have a common factor of x plus 4, so we can factor that out. All right, so if we factor out the x plus 4 out of those two terms, then the other factor becomes x squared plus 3. All right, so all we're doing is factoring out that x plus 4. And voila, look at that. We have it all factored. That's cool. All right, so that's essentially what we're going to be doing. We're looking for pairs of factors that have a common factor. All right, so again, first of all, I'm going to, in this next example, I'm going to look at the first two terms. I see that they both have a factor of 3 and a factor of x. So I'm going to factor out a 3x. And then what I have left is x minus 2. All right. And then the second pair of factors, the second pair of terms have a common factor of 2. So I'm going to factor out a 2, and I'm left with x minus 2. And now you can see I have two terms, right? Both of which have a factor of x minus 2. So I'm going to factor that out. So I'm going to factor out the x minus 2. Make sure you leave it in parentheses. It's a factor. All right, and then what I have left is 3x plus 2. All right. Now, let's take a look at this next one. Now, when you're pairing up these terms, sometimes you have a minus in the middle, and it's advantageous to change that to plus a negative, okay? So I'm going to pair up the first two terms, and I can see that I have a common factor of x squared. So I'm going to factor that out, and I end up with 7x minus 1, right? When I factor the first pair of terms. And then I'm going to put a plus in the middle, right? Because this is plus. And then I see a common factor of 2. Actually, I'm going to make it a negative 2. Right? I can see, because sometimes I like to have the first term to be positive. All right, so I'm going to factor out a negative 2. And then what I'm left with is 7x minus 1 again. All right. Now you can see why I chose to factor out a negative 2, because now I have two terms and they both have a common factor of 7x minus 1, which I can now factor out. So 7x minus 1, right? I'm going to factor out that common factor, and then what I'm left with is x squared, and then this, I still have a minus, it's plus a negative 2, or I could write it as minus 2. Okay, so when you're pairing up pairing up terms like that, and to find a common factor, it's often advantageous to change subtraction into plus and negative. All right. All right. So here's another one, another case where we have in the middle we have a negative. So I am going to change that into plus a negative x, right, in the middle, and then I'm going to pair up these terms, and I can see in the first pair of terms I have a common factor of x, so I'm going to factor that out, and then x minus 3 is left, and then I have a plus in the middle, and I'm going to factor out a -1. All right. And you can see why, because it's like I like this x minus 3. So if I factor out a -1, I'll have x minus 3, right? And now each one I have two terms, right? This is a term and this is a term. They both have a common factor of x minus 3, so I'm going to factor that out. So x minus 3 times x plus a -1, or I can write it as -1. All right, a little bit tricky. So practice that skill, and I'll meet you in the next video.